For most of the age of sail, a ship's captain could tell you exactly how far north or south he was, to within a mile or two, using instruments and a bit of arithmetic. And he could not tell you how far east or west he was at all. Not roughly, not approximately. He was guessing, and he knew he was guessing, and so did everyone aboard. This is not a small gap in a mostly working system. This is half of a position. A ship in the middle of an ocean knew it was somewhere along a line running all the way round the world. And the reason for that is worth understanding, because it is not a shipbuilding problem or a sailing problem. It is a clock problem. Start with the easy half. Latitude, how far north or south, can be read off the sky. The angle of the sun at noon or the height of the pole star at night changes in a predictable way as you move north or south. Measure the angle, consult a table, and you have your latitude. It works because the sky itself tells you where you are on that axis. Now try east and west, and here the sky is no help because the earth turns. The stars sweep past overhead in exactly the same way whether you are off the coast of Spain or 1,000 miles out in the Atlantic. Nothing about the view above you distinguishes one from the other. But there is a way through, and it had been understood for a very long time. The Earth turns once in a day, which means it turns 15 degrees every hour. So if you know the time at some fixed reference place, say your home port, and you can work out the local time where you are by watching when the sun reaches its highest point, then the difference between those two times is your longitude. 1 hour of difference is 15 degrees. That is the whole method. It is not complicated. It was known for centuries. The problem is the first half of the sentence. If you know the time at your home port, because to know that, you have to carry it with you. And that means you need a clock that keeps accurate time for months on a wooden ship in salt air through storms and tropical heat and near freezing nights while being thrown around constantly. And in the early 18th century, that machine did not exist. The best clocks in the world were pendulum clocks. And a pendulum clock works by swinging a weight under gravity at a steady rate. Put one on a ship and the deck rises and falls beneath it, which changes the swing. Heat and cold expand and contract the metal, which changes the swing. Damp gets into the mechanism, which changes everything. The finest timekeeping technology on Earth was useless the moment it went to sea. So what did Navigator actually do? They estimated. The method was called dead reckoning, and it worked like this. You know you're heading from the compass. You measure your speed by throwing a knotted line overboard and counting the knots that run out in a set time, which is where the word knot comes from. You note the time, you multiply it out, and you mark your best guess on the chart. Then you do it again and again for weeks, and every small error in speed or heading or current is added on top of every previous error, and none of them ever cancel out. By the end of a long voyage, a ship could be 100 miles from where it believed it was, which is fine in the middle of an ocean and lethal near land. And in 1707, this stopped being an abstract problem. A British fleet returning from the Mediterranean believed it was safely in open water off the coast. It was not. It ran onto the rocks of the Scilly Isles at night, and 4 ships were lost, along with something like 1,500 to 2,000 men. An admiral died with them. It was one of the worst peacetime naval disasters in British history, and it was a navigational failure. The response 7 years later was a piece of legislation that is genuinely unusual. Parliament announced a prize, a very large sum of money, the equivalent of a fortune, for anyone who could produce a method of determining longitude at sea to within half a degree. A board was created to judge it, made up of astronomers, naval officers, and mathematicians. And notice who was on that board, because it matters. The scientific establishment of the day believed the answer would come from the sky. Their preferred approach was to use the moon. The moon moves against the background stars on a predictable schedule. So in principle, if you measure the angle between the moon and a particular star, and you have tables telling you what the angle should be at a given time at your reference port, you can work out the time back home without any clock at all. It is elegant. It is scientifically respectable. And it required an enormous amount of astronomical work to produce the tables. A skilled observer, clear skies, and about 4 hours of calculation for a single fix. That was the method the experts expected to win. And then a carpenter from Lincolnshire turned up with a clock. He had no formal training. He had taught himself by taking mechanisms apart. He built his early clocks almost entirely out of wood, using a hardwood that secretes its own oil so the bearings would not need lubricating, because oil at sea thickens and gums and fails. That is the kind of thinking that runs through all of his work. Not, how do I make this better? But what is the actual thing that makes this fail? And how do I remove it? His first sea clock was a large brass machine with 2 link balances that swung against each other, so that when the ship rolled, the motion canceled out rather than disturbing the rate. It worked well enough to be taken seriously. He spent the next 30 years making it better. A second version, a third, which took him nearly 20 years and which he could never quite make reliable. And then he did the most remarkable thing in this entire story. He abandoned his own approach. After decades committed to large machines, he built something about 5 inches across, a watch. Everything he had learned about compensating for temperature and eliminating friction compressed into a pocket-sized object. It was tested on a voyage to the West Indies. Over 81 days at sea, it lost about 5 seconds. That is comfortably inside what the prize required. And here is where the story stops being about engineering. Because the board did not pay. They asked for another trial. He passed it. They said the result might have been luck and required him to hand over the watch and his earlier machines. Take the watch apart in front of them, explain the mechanism completely, and then have copies made by other people to prove it could be reproduced. Some of that is reasonable. A method nobody else can build is not much use to a navy. But the requirements kept arriving after the fact, and the man judging much of this was the Astronomer Royal, who was himself the leading advocate of the lunar method, and who sat on the board deciding whether the clock had won. He was, in effect, a rival with a vote. The whole thing dragged on for years. In the end, in his late 70s, the clockmaker went over their heads and petitioned the king directly. The king tested a watch himself at his own private observatory, found that it kept excellent time, and was reportedly furious on the man's behalf. Parliament eventually voted him a large payment, but he never received the official prize, and the board never formally declared him the winner. He died 3 years later, at 83. Now, in fairness, because this is usually told as heroes and villains, the lunar method was not a fraud. It genuinely worked, and for a while it was cheaper. because a chronometer costs as much as a good house. For decades, Navigator used both, checking one against the other. But copies of his watch went to sea, including with Cook, who used one to chart enormous stretches of the Pacific with an accuracy nobody had managed before. And the price came down, as prices do, and within a couple of generations, a marine chronometer was standard equipment on any serious ship. The problem was closed. So think about what was actually required here. Not a discovery. The method was understood before he was born. What was missing was a physical object that could hold a number steady while the world shook it. Every ship that arrived where it intended for the next 200 years did so because someone worked out how to keep a machine telling the truth about time in the worst possible conditions. His original sea clocks are in a museum in Greenwich now. They have been restored and they are wound daily and they are still running, which is, when you think about it, exactly the argument he was making.